Stalked, then murdered. The killing of dancer Lynette White at Coogee more than 40 years ago still haunts police.
She'd been stabbed to death. Their 11-week-old baby was asleep nearby.
It's one of the most shocking crimes in Sydney's history. A young father returns home to find his beautiful wife murdered inside the family home, just a metre away from where her newborn son slept in his cot. For 50 years, this brutal crime has gone unsolved.
Fingerprints were found in the unit. They've never been identified.
But there are fresh leads.
They did find a blood stain under the carpet of the unit and extracted the DNA of 2 unknown men.
Who killed Lynn White?
He was in the building at around the time of Lynn's murder.
This is a live police investigation. With your help, New South Wales Police can catch Lynn's killer.
There's got to be somebody out there, there's got to be, that knows something.
I'm Deborah Wallace. I served with the New South Wales Police for 37 years. And now, I want to help police with some of Australia's toughest unsolved cases.
The body was found just before midday.
She was just literally placed with no concealment.
These are the $1 million murders. All cases can be solved, they're never cold, and you never give up. I'm driving through one of Sydney's most famous suburbs, Coogee. Residents lucky enough to live here look over an iconic coastline. It's been a summer playground for Sydney-siders for well over a century. Driving out of Coogee on the northern side, I reach Beach Street and stop at number 26. It was here inside unit number 3 that a beautiful young mum, Lynn White, was brutally stabbed to death in 1973. Can you describe Lynn for me? What was she like?
I don't know if there'd be enough words in the dictionary to be able to describe her. Very caring lady. As well as being beautiful. She was always happy. She had this very positive attitude in life. I think I'll learn a lot from her with that beautiful attitude of hers.
When Paul and Lynn met in the late 60s, they were still teenagers. Paul was smitten. But Lynn took a little longer to appreciate his charms.
I was definitely starstruck, I know that. I had to work hard to win her over.
And what did Lynn do for a job?
She was a hairdresser, and she ended up starting her own hairdressing salon down in Botsons Bay. Turned into a very good business.
It was just one of those friendships that was just magic, I think.
And I believe you actually worked for Lynn?
Just some Saturdays I'd go over there and help her at Watson's Bay in the salon.
Lynn Louie was one of Lynn's best friends from those sunny days when everything revolved around the beach. Where did you like to go out?
We'd either go down to the Coogee Bay Hotel or Saturdays afternoon we'd go up to the Oceanic and then have a few drinks, a few laughs and dance and then meet the guys.
Paul and Lynn both grew up in the eastern suburbs. He was a volunteer surf lifesaver and a rugby player. And Lynn, as well as being a hairdresser, was also a dancer. So their circle of friends was quite large?
Very large. I don't know anyone that has as many friends as they had. It was unbelievable.
Lynn's passion was dancing. Hawaiian hula style.
She took to like a duck to water. We'd go around to licensed clubs, either with a group called the Aloas. Sometimes she'd do shows on her own, and so I'd go with her.
Did she ever get unwanted attention as a result of that, do you think?
Only on the odd occasion you'd have a guy who may have had one or two too many, but she never went out of her way to excite people, I guess.
February 1971 was a big month for Lynn and Paul. They got married and bought the unit at 26 Beach Street.
We virtually bought it off the plan, and there was only 6 units in the block. It had a great outlook, a balcony out the front that looked down towards the old Tomo's Bay. I think they call it Gordon's Bay these days.
Baby Shane arrived on the scene in March 1973. He was much loved by his parents. Although Lynn confided to friends, she suffered from postnatal depression. Lynn's anxiety was not helped by a series of obscene phone calls which always seemed to come when she was home alone with Shane.
She told me once that this guy, he sounded as if he was a druggie, and she tried to help him on the phone. She tried to counsel him. And I said, well, don't. He might feel you're egging him on, but she said, no, he needs help. So that's what she was like. She tried to help people.
Turns out there are a lot of women in the eastern suburbs being targeted by these obscene callers in the 70s.
I remember getting them myself at one particular job I worked at. You know, that was scary at the time, but that was about it.
One day, Lynn had a particularly unnerving experience. She was confronted by a flasher standing at her front door. Paul and Lynn considered a number of remedies, calling the police, putting a safety latch on the door, but in the end, they did none of those things.
I had a peephole in the door, and I said, Lynn, whatever you do, if you don't know that person, don't open that door.
Take me back to June 8, 1973. Can you tell me everything you remember of that day?
That's a day. Went to work as normal, out to Hurstville, maybe around about 8 in the morning. Kissed Lynn goodbye and Shane. Sorry.
Paul's job was selling advertising space for a suburban paper in southern Sydney. He tried calling home a few times during the day, but Lynn wasn't picking up.
Then I thought, hang on a minute, it was my mother's birthday that day. And I knew they were going out, so I wasn't overly worried.
It was a Friday. Paul had a few beers with his co-workers at the pub after work before dropping by his parents' place in Maroubra.
I phoned from there, from Mum and Dad's. There's still no answer. So this is maybe, I'm thinking 7, they're about 7:30 at night. So I hopped in the car and raced home. Parked out the front, ran up the stairs, and I remember turned the light on in the hallway and I could see Lynn's legs protruding out from the second bedroom. Raced in and turned the light on and just blood everywhere. Lying on the back, the throat was being slashed. I do remember feeling for a pulse, and I knew then she was cold and clammy, and I couldn't get her back. So she was in Shane's bedroom. Now the cot was only about, let's say, about a metre away from Lynn. Luckily he hadn't been touched. Picked him up. I couldn't believe it. I just went to pieces.
In June 1973, Paul White returned to his Coogee home to make a shocking discovery. His wife Lynn had been murdered. She'd been stabbed multiple times. Her throat had been slashed and she was left partially naked.
It's a terribly tragic, sad murder, and the fact that the baby was nearby makes it even sadder.
Detective Superintendent Danny Doherty, who commands the New South Wales Homicide Squad, has oversight of the reinvestigation into the murder of Lynn White. This would be one of the oldest cases on your books. What makes solving a case like this so challenging?
With the passage of time, it makes it very difficult. It's a lack of evidence, it's a lack of witnesses. 1973, what was around at that time? CCTV and mobile phone technology and other technology wasn't around.
The first thing police did was to check out Paul's alibi in order to eliminate him as a suspect. They also spoke to his neighbours at 26 Beach Street.
Back in the 70s, anyone in that unit complex would have been spoken to and interviewed, and I know indeed later on they were.
Two witnesses came forward to say they'd seen a very strange-looking man leaving the Beach Street block at lunchtime, which was around the time police believe Lynn was killed.
He described him as a very thin red beard, unusual red beard, and red hair. He was number one suspect at that stage.
Over 30 people were actually interviewed in relation to that identikit.
The lead investigator on the case was Detective Cole Mackey.
He was a bulldog. He went to town on red-headed blokes. He said, if there's a red-headed guy in these suburbs that I haven't brought in or questioned, he's not there.
Mackey's relentless pursuit of red-headed men discovered no persons of interest. Is that identikit still relevant?
It's still relevant today as it was back then.
Two other interesting clues came from the crime scene. Police found no sign of forced entry to Unit 3. And they soon figured out the knife used to stab Lynn came from her own kitchen, which means her killer arrived at the door without the murder weapon. Does that suggest to you that the motive wasn't to murder her?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, but it does indicate that more of a sexually motive.
How did the killer gain entry to the unit without smashing the door down? Evidence was found in the apartment that could reveal the killer's modus operandi. Police found a broken coffee cup just inside the door to the unit.
They took me back to the unit. I remember the detective pointing that broken cup out to me. Their thoughts were, he's asked for that cup of water, so she's left the door closed, gone to the kitchen, filled up with water, and he's come back and he said, I can't reach the cup. And pushed the door, and maybe she was behind the door or the cup's fallen and broken.
When police saw the broken cup, they drew a direct link to another attack which occurred 8 months prior to Lynn's murder. The attacker's MO, at least in terms of how they could have gained entry, was almost identical.
There was a schoolgirl who was down in Coogee, the same scenario, cup inside the door, and they think back then it was the same guy.
The schoolgirl attack occurred in Dolphin Street, Coogee, just a few minutes from Beach Street. The girl escaped her attacker and raised the alarm. She described him as a young man with brown hair, a pot belly, and possibly a broken front tooth. Was this the same man who attacked and killed Lynn 8 months later? Police never found the of the schoolgirl.
This guy's still loose. He could re-offend.
In April 1974, less than a year after Lynn was stabbed to death, 20-year-old Maria Smith, who'd been married for just 8 weeks, was murdered inside this apartment block on St Mark's Road, Randwick. It's just a short walk from Lynn's unit.
Stephen Smith, who was Maria's newly-wed husband, had left the unit, went off to work, came back, and Maria's body was found in the bedroom. She had been gagged, she had been sexually assaulted, and she'd been bound, and she was strangled.
Police were immediately struck by the similarities between Maria and Lynn's murder.
The original investigators believed they were linked, and my personal view, I don't think it's ever been unlinked. There's still strong connections between both matters.
Was a serial and killer preying on young women in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. The 1974 murder of Maria Smith in Randwick sent detectives into a tailspin. Was the man who killed her the same man responsible for the murder of Lynn White 10 months prior? Both young women killed at home, in broad daylight, while their husbands were at work. I'm curious to know what the similarities and differences were between the two crime scenes. Rod, where were you stationed in 1974?
Yes, I was attached to Daceyville detectives at that time.
I'm talking to Rod Kennedy, one of the first responders at the block of units in Randwick, where Maria Smith had been murdered.
I might have been at home and I was nearby. Anyway, I went straight up to the crime scene and sealed the crime scene off. And I can remember some people arriving, including, I think, the superintendent. And I told everybody that no one was to enter the crime scene at all until the scientific, or they call them physical evidence police, arrived and had a good go at the crime scene.
Rod Kennedy was determined the Maria Smith crime scene was going to be processed by the book. He'd seen for himself the negative consequences of contaminated crime scenes. 10 months prior to Maria's murder, Kennedy was briefly assigned to the Lynn White case in Beach Street.
As a crime scene goes, it was a disaster. because it was such a shambolic affair, I think they found, from memory, the fingerprints of some 13 police officers who had come to the crime scene from all over Sydney. There was the fingerprints of an officer who'd come all the way from Hornsby, who had no right to be there at all, quite frankly. Over the years, it's quoted in various detectives courses and training courses as probably one of the worst examples of what should not happen at a crime scene.
At the crime scene in Randwick, they found no sign of forced entry to Maria Smith's unit. But they did find evidence of a possible ruse by the offender to get in the door.
There was information from the original investigators that someone knocked on the door for Maria Smith to ask for a pen and paper.
The pen and paper were found scattered near Maria's body. And there was another telling piece of evidence.
The person who was responsible for both murders never brought a weapon to either of the scenes.
Lynn died from injuries inflicted by her own kitchen knife.
In relation to Maria Smith, a knife was found near her body as well. That was from the unit.
The killer used Maria's kitchen knife to cut off her clothing and then used the clothing to strangle her.
With Lynn's situation, there was a cloth that was found nearby that was suggested to be a gag as well. So there were some obvious links and parallels.
Yes, the modus operandi in both matters was extremely similar. I believe both matters are intertwined and that the same individual murdered both of those poor ladies.
That's exactly what the lead detective Cole Mackey said at the time. He said, if you solve one, you solve the other. Is that what you believe?
Yes, I do. I have a great respect for Cole.
There's also the Dolphin Street that occurred in 1972.
Yes.
The MO of how the offender entered the apartment for that offence is almost identical to the two murders. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. I just don't have any knowledge of that matter whatsoever, but if it's similar to these two matters here, unfortunately, it indicates that there was perhaps a serial offender operating at the time.
The murders of Lynn White and Maria Smith created a tense and fearful atmosphere on the streets of Sydney, especially in the eastern suburbs. Even hardened police officers had second thoughts about leaving their loved ones at home alone.
I was born in Randwick and brought up in Randwick area. And at the time that these murders occurred, I was living at Coogee, and I was a newly married person. Bear in mind that my wife was at home sometimes on her own.
Was a serial offender lying in wait and picking off targets? That viewpoint was certainly given currency when it was discovered that Lynn White and Maria Smith were both subjected to obscene phone calls. Lynn told her husband Paul the drug-affected man who'd been calling was also threatening her, saying he was coming to get her.
It appeared that someone knew or had been watching her because they make mention of the baby.
This is one of the most disturbing aspects of the case. The obscene phone caller said he had prepared a white coffin for the baby. Can you imagine the terror that would have caused Lynn? Especially if that same man talked his way into her apartment.
From there, I'm thinking that he's propositioned Lynn. She's neglected him and obviously tried to get him out of the place.
Yep.
I can imagine her worrying about Shane. He's in his cot. She's fought off the attacker. He's gone crazy with a knife.
In the murder investigation of Lynn White, years, in fact decades, go by without a result. But then an old friend of Paul White, Bob Worth, started to dig around. Bob was a journalist and had grown up with Paul in the South Maroubra Surf Club.
Yeah, Bob was great. He, as well as being a great mate from the old surf club days, he, being a journo, he said to me, look, I'd like to write a book about Lynn. Say 2010, around about then, when he started writing the book. So while he was doing that, he had a hell lot of questions to ask the cops. There was questions there they had trouble answering.
Bob wanted to know if new DNA technology was being employed to review all the evidence from 1973.
The superintendent at the time, he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but quite a bit of the evidence was lost. The knife has been lost. And I said, how the hell could you lose a knife? That knife. Clothes were lost, skin under her fingernails, they told me. All these different items gone.
This was devastating news, and a double blow because key evidence in the Maria Smith murder case had also been lost. But then, in 2017, there was new police interest in the case.
At the moment we're in Coogee. I think I needed to initially come out here and get a sense of what it actually looks like.
Detective Dion Kelly took charge of the reinvestigation.
This is Unit 3, where Lynette and Paul lived. There was no sign of there being any forced entry, and I believe it's very possible that she would have known the person that came in on that day.
To establish the identity of that person, Detective Kelly had to get creative. He started by reading the case files and re-examining all the old crime scene photos. There, plain as day, he could see a couple of piles of bloodied nappies in the corridor near Lynn's body. Now, it turns out that on the day of the murder, there'd been a delivery of fresh nappies for baby Shane. One of the original investigators in this case, Cole Mackey, believes that the knock on the door from the nappy lady had some significance to what occurred.
Yes, I believe that person heard a noise inside the unit after knocking on the door to deliver the nappies. The noise then stopped. That may be the actual time when there was a struggle between whoever killed Lynn and Lynn fighting for her life. That may have been the catalyst, that knock on the door, to make sure that Lynn was going to be kept quiet.
The nappies were later found inside the door to the unit, blood-stained, suggesting the killer used them to wipe his hands after attacking Lynn. But did he also injure himself?
They said there was a lot of blood on the nappies, so I'm assuming that he's probably wiped his hands. Whether he's cut himself, who knows?
Regrettably, the nappies were lost by police along with the knife. In order to retrieve a sample of the killer's DNA, Detective Kelly removed the carpet where Lynn had been murdered.
I got a call from Dion. He said he's sitting down. We've been back to the unit, we've taken up the carpet, and he said, would you believe, he said, maybe you won't, but there's blood in the concrete after all these years. That gave me the greatest hope. I thought, this is it. We've got him.
The renewed investigation has uncovered a blood stain at the scene.
Police did find a blood stain under the carpet of the unit.
Word soon got out that police had recovered DNA from 1973.
I came across Lynn White's case in 2016 when I was working as a crime reporter for the Sydney Morning Herald. I was really interested to see if they had found anything.
Testing the bloodstains revealed a DNA profile for Lynn White.
What was interesting is they also extracted 2 male DNA profiles. For a long time, police were treating this case as the work of a single killer, but the existence of a second DNA profile sort of made them think, oh, could a second person have been involved in this?
Police then tried to match the 2 DNA profiles through the National Criminal Database.
Now, what that is a national database with DNA samples from crime scenes and criminals all across the country. But unfortunately, there was no matches.
That was a setback. But by no means was it the end of the story.
After police revisited the case, they started not only going over the people that were interviewed in the 1970s, but identifying people who hadn't been interviewed and maybe should have.
Police renewed their interest in all the other residents who lived at 26 Beach Street in 1973.
The units at the back, they were continuously rented out to mainly backpackers. There'd be anywhere between 6 and 8 living in each one, 2-bedroom units. So there'd be parties, so they got out of hand a bit.
This was the scene of the crime, and there were people living in those apartments who were never spoken to by police.
Those people that had not spoken to the police, we would like to reach out and speak with them now.
Police were particularly interested in the residents of Unit 4, which was right opposite Lynn and Paul's unit.
We really need to hear from other people that may have been in Unit 4 or visited Unit 4 that haven't spoken to the police as yet.
The 2017 probe led police to a British national who quickly became a person of interest in their inquiry.
I think Dion really hit on one particular backpacker. He interviewed this guy's brother and broke down on the phone. I don't know what was said, but also Dion mentioned about this guy's girlfriend, what she had said.
He had told her or expressed that he had an infatuation with a woman who was a brunette that lived in the same building in the 1970s. Police were also told that he was in the building at around the time of Lynn's murder. One of the most unfortunate elements of this is that key suspect died several years ago from natural causes, I think in about 2007. So there was no way for those detectives to front up to that suspect and to ask him for his version of events.
He remains a person of interest in Lynn's murder.
We've got to keep an open mind whether that person is responsible or not, and we still need to have a focus on the unit block.
I'm re-examining the unsolved murder of Lynn White at her Coogee apartment in 1973. Reviewing the facts of the case with me is retired New South Wales Police Detective Wayne Hayes. Thanks for joining me today, Wayne.
My pleasure.
What particularly struck you upon reading those files?
The primary one was the savagery of the attack. There's 11 stab wounds, her throat was cut, and this all happened in the baby's bedroom at the time. It would appear that the offender or offenders have gained entry without force. And that's a little unusual, bearing in mind the savagery of the attack.
Do you believe that the offender entered the unit with the purpose of killing Lynn?
I doubt it. I believe somebody's come there with a sexual motive, expecting it to be, I'll use the term welcomed. I think it's more the offender's expectation from what I've read. Something happens to turn it to the murder. It's possible the offender, to gain his purpose with the sexual act, may have threatened the child, and there's been resistance from Lynn.
And I believe there's also been a renewed focus on the residents of the unit block.
Yes, in my view, it's entirely possible it's somebody within the unit block who would explain so many things. They can gain access to the unit because they probably be known to the person. They know the movements of the people, particularly the husband, that he would go out. They know that there's a new baby in the place. They know that Lynn stays home. It also explains such things as when the police do a canvass, that maybe that person has already left. It also explains why their DNA is not on the data system if they are an offender.
Until a few years ago, police held no hope that they would be able to match DNA to Lynn's killer or killers, because original evidence from the unit was lost. Wayne offers this explanation.
I can understand it. I was in the cops for 43 years, and when I first joined, DNA was not even thought about. Police exhibit rooms every year got hundreds to thousands of exhibits coming in. You just have no room for things. It was basically policy to move things on or destroy them. But it certainly makes it a lot harder.
The unmatched DNA profiles found under the carpet may yet find a match through other means.
Whilst we may not have some primary DNA at the moment, there's familial DNA that may come about, forensic genealogy that would increase our chances into the future. So those sort of technologies, we hope that may give us some answers down the track.
Now, I'd like to touch on a couple of other lines of inquiry in the Lynn White case. The first is that the killer may have been associated with a company called Swipe, which developed a range of cleaning products in the 70s. Paul and Lynn became involved in direct sales of Swipe.
The Swipe cleaning company that both Lynn and Paul were a part of operated like a Tupperware party. They would have people come over to their house and they would sell cleaning products, and a lot of the stock was kept in their garage of their apartment block. So you can imagine that there were a lot of people coming and going. And Lynn had said that one day a man who worked at the same company turned up and made a sort of sexual advance towards her, and that rattled her. And Paul and Lynn had talked about this and what to do about it, and they decided not to report it to police.
After Lynn's murder, Paul reported the incident to police.
So that was a line of inquiry in relation to any of those males that may have had any interest in Lynn or may have shown any interest in Lynn. But however, again, there's nothing to confirm or link them to the murder.
I also want to touch on a second eyewitness account of a man seen leaving 26 Beach Street on the day of Lynn's murder. Now, this was separate to the sighting of the man with the red hair and beard.
Police had received an anonymous tip from someone about a man they saw coming out of the apartment driveway who looked to be holding a towel or a nappy against his head. And the person who reported this tip to police thought it was really unusual.
For a long time, there was speculation he could have been Lynn's killer, holding up a towel or nappy to protect his identity or to hide the fact he'd been injured. Police have tracked him down.
That person's identity was established. Fingerprints was obtained to match against any fingerprints that were found in the unit, and there was nothing to link him to that murder.
While most of the physical evidence was lost or destroyed, the fingerprints remain on file.
And what hasn't been well known is there's fingerprints were found in the unit, and they've never been identified. And so we are working with our international agencies and counterparts to try to identify those fingerprints that may give us some answers down the track.
For 50 years, Paul White has lived with the loss of his beloved wife, Lynn. Maroubra is a place they both knew well because of Paul's volunteer work with the Surf Lifesavers. The night that Paul found Lynn murdered in the Beach Street unit was the worst night of his life. As the first suspect in the case, he spent 10 hours at the police station being questioned.
The cops put me in a car and took me down there and, of course, fingerprinted me, handprinted me, understandably. Yeah, so that was a hard night. Obviously, I didn't sleep all night. I think my brother came over from Mum and Dad's and picked me up at sunrise. We got home to my parents' place in Maroubra, and when I woke up sometime in the afternoon, I said to Mum and Dad, I'm just going for a walk. I walked down to Maroubra Beach. I remember it was a windy, cold day, and I just sat out the front of the old pavilion. Had a few surfers down there, and I looked at the ocean. And I thought, gee, I could swim across to New Zealand. You know, I could do that. Luckily, I kept thinking of Shane, and went home.
The next 3 years were a blur for Paul as he dealt with the trauma. He shared custody of Shane with Lynn's mother, Beryl, until he was ready to become a full-time dad. And then he rebuilt his life around his little boy. Shane was just 11 weeks old when his mum died. How did you tell him what happened to his mum?
Well, that was a difficult one. I thought about it for a while when he was, I think, around about the 7 mark. And I'm thinking, well, if I don't tell him, somebody else might. We're travelling up, funnily enough, to see Beryl. She was living up at Foster then. There's a McDonald's about halfway up. So we called in there and I told him. And I didn't tell him much, but enough. So he took it in. Yeah, he accepted very well, actually, and always has. Yeah.
And you've got a very strong relationship with him.
Oh, yeah. He's a great father. He's very caring. He's...
You must be proud of the man he's become.
Very much so. He's so much like his mother. Truly, he's just his nature. Obviously, he doesn't take after me, but...
Oh, I think you should give yourself more credit, Paul.
Oh, he's good.
A few years ago, Paul was encouraged by police to apply to the coroner for a second inquest into Lynn's murder, based on the revelation of the blood discovery in the unit.
The coroner came back with their so there's not enough new evidence to go ahead with an inquest. So, yeah, that was it at this stage, yeah.
Do you ever give up hope?
Never. Never. I'll...
What motivates you to keep going to look for answers?
Sometimes I ask myself what... but I think it really, Deb, I think it really goes back to the good old mother-in-law Beryl. Before she passed, she made me make a promise that to never give up on it. Where there's hope, there's a chance. So yeah, I'll never give up.
And neither will the police.
Today, police mark the anniversary by upping the ante in the search for a breakthrough, increasing the current reward of $100,000 to $1 million.
The mega reward announcement came just 1 month after police upsized the reward for information leading them to Maria Smith's killer.
Now, Maria was horribly murdered. There is now $1 million on the table for you to come forward.
If the murders of Maria Smith and Lynn White are linked, and the same killer or killers are responsible for both crimes, then someone could be $2 million richer by delivering the vital evidence police need to secure convictions. For the past 15 years, Paul has shared his life with Wendy.
She's a retired nurse. She's got 4 children of her own. She's got 9 grandchildren. So in conjunction with my grandkids, we've got a footy team. She's a very much like Lynn in a lot of ways. She's a very caring person. I think she's trying to keep me young, which is good, yeah.
I do support him in everything he does, because that's just what he has to do. But each time something comes up, I sort of think, oh, here we go again. Because in a way, if he gets a result, I don't know whether it would be the end either.
And the passage of time doesn't diminish that hurt for Paul White or his family. His heart is broken now as it has ever been. He desperately wants the answers.
It is an image that you would just never forget. I think it would just be seared in your brain, and you just carry it around with you for a very long time.
Paul, what would you like to say to anyone out there that might be watching this program?
I beg anybody out there that knows a little bit of something that could solve Lynn's case. I just beg them to come forward.